I'm very happy to say, and I'm thrilled to have two of our incredible associate facilitators with us today. I'm very grateful for both of you. They're both very dear to my heart. And I would love to give space for both of them to introduce themselves to you all. So I will first go to Kelly. Ladies first.
Thank you, Eva. It's lovely to be with you all today. Greetings to everyone from all around the world. My name is Kelly Pınar Goodwin, and I was raised and have spent my whole life between cultures. My parents are from the United States, but I was born in Turkey, and so I found myself from a young age helping my foreign friends understand my Turkish friends and helping my Turkish friends understand my foreign friends. And that led me to a lifelong curiosity about culture and helping people from different backgrounds understand each other. So I went on to study anthropology and intercultural studies, had my own cross-cultural experience as an adult living for 6 years in the Arab Middle East. I did anthropological research at the University of Basra and then came back to Turkey, where I live today, and founded Culture Savvy, where I help teams and leaders work effectively across cultures. And I've been a facilitator also with the Cultural Intelligence Center, where I'm certified at the advanced level, both in CQ and unconscious bias. So it's a pleasure to be with you today, and I look forward to answering your questions and this conversation.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. Great to have you here. Please feel free. I see somebody raise their hand. Please feel free to use chat options for any comments, any questions. If you just want to say hi, or if you want to share, as we ask you to share one cultural challenge that you're experiencing in today's world. Joe, floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here as always. First of all, allow me to thank you, Eva and Prudence, for supporting us during the day. And Kelly, it's a pleasure to share the online stage with you. So my name is Joe Al-Haddad, originally Lebanese, but I'm a fake Lebanese. So I've never lived in Lebanon. So I hold the Lebanese passport, but I live and I was born in the GCC. So I also, similar to Kelly, I fly around a lot. So part of my work is, I believe, managing through different cultures and understanding different cultures and sort of becoming the bridge in terms of the communication. I'm a certified associate facilitator with Cultural Intelligence Center. I've been working with CQC for the past 10 years. And it's been a life-changing experience, not just for me, but just passing this knowledge to different organizations has also been life-changing, team-changing, organization-changing for many. I'm also a certified emotional intelligence practitioner and coach, and I'm also a PCC level coach. So I basically love to incorporate cultural intelligence in almost all of the programs I run, because I love to see how people start to come to that moment of realization. So I'm looking forward to what we're going to discuss today, and I hope that we're able to share a lot of knowledge with everybody.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you both. We just had a question. I see somebody even answered. So somebody asked in the chat, Joe, for you, what is GCC? And for everyone, Joe is referring to the region, but if you want to, Joe, clarify, please go ahead.
So the GCC basically is a short term for the Gulf Countries Corporation. So it's basically the region combining Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Oman. You got as well with it
UAE.
UAE, yes, United Arab Emirates.
Yes.
Qatar,
Yeah.
where I currently am working from. Bahrain, yes, there you go, Bahrain. Someone,
Right.
thank you for the
Yes.
help, guys. Thanks for the help. Yeah, so
But
it's a corporation of different countries that basically actually came together because they basically carry the same value system. And one of the things that brings them together is religion as well, which is Islam. And it's one of the beautiful examples, I believe, of how culture can actually, if understood well, can bring people together. It's a really interesting story. I think you could also read more about the GCC and how amazing it is. So yeah, sort of our version of the European Union.
Thank you, Joe. And I just wanted to make sure we are clear with everyone with the language that we use. So before we all of us jump into this amazing conversation for today, where we will obviously talk how do we create this lasting impact with the CQ training. I just want to quickly address what is cultural intelligence, what we call CQ, just to make sure that we are all on the same page. So in short, CQ is a capability to work and relate effectively with people who think and behave differently from us. We can think about it as a very simple to remember, but not simple to apply framework that can help us to know what exactly we need to do and cover all the steps that are really crucial and needed for us to be efficient in a culturally diverse situation. And also, I would love us just to address the word culture, because word culture has so many meanings. And when we start training, sometimes we ask people, please share with us, you both know that, what is culture for you? Please share one word. And it's great to see how many different words for different people culture really means. But when we say culture, people typically go into, they think about nationality and where people come from, although culture can really come from many, many different places, from our generation, different profession, different types of organization, religion. Basically, all of these shape how we work together. So let's start from the beginning. And I want us basically to talk about, since you're both such extraordinary and experienced facilitators, I would love you to tell our audience, when you're introducing CQ to a group for the first time or organization, how do you get people to really see the real value in CQ? Maybe we can start with this question with Kelly.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a great question. And the place I like to start is understanding the context of the people or organization who I'm speaking with. So what's their background? What are the things that are going on right now? Why are we having this conversation? Why did they reach out in the first place? Is there a pressing need that they're wanting addressed? What are they wanting to get out of this kind of a solution, right? So I try to dig deep and really understand what's going on, what's the motivator, what's bringing this conversation to the forefront. And then I use that information to make my case relevant, right? To make CQ relevant. Because I might pull out a statistic from somewhere, but if that's not the pain point that they have, then it really isn't that effective, right? So there's so much both research data around CQ and then experiential data around CQ. So understanding the potential client context really helps me pick and choose what's going to be most powerful, most useful, most helpful to the potential client who I'm working with. And sometimes that means we're going to go more of an awareness route. Maybe they're just like, we have all this stuff going on, but we don't understand why we're having these communication problems. And, we have unconscious bias that we can see, but we don't understand where it's coming from. Maybe we're going to start with a little bit of awareness there. And then sometimes you have other companies that are like, oh, we know all that awareness stuff, but we need help with actually doing, the actual relating across difference. And then that would kind of shape our conversation differently as well. I could share an example here of, I was once having a conversation with an in-house consulting firm. And as we got to talking, after I introduced CQ, and here's our the four capabilities, they said, well, actually, we only hire consultants who graduate from the top schools around the world. And at these schools, they already have, managing across cultures or navigating cultures. They already see classes like that. And so we don't really think that we need CQ. They said, but we're open. So why don't you just go ahead and present and we'll see. So that was, of course, a little awkward for me, but I'm game. So I go ahead and I talk through, well, here's CQ drive, here's CQ knowledge, here's CQ strategy. And they actually interrupt me when I talk about CQ strategy. And they say, even though our consultants are graduating from these top schools where they see these classes, they have a problem with turning that knowledge into action, to actually implementing what they've learned. So these are some of the examples where it's important to understand what are the needs, what's the context, and then kind of pitch accordingly. So that would be my thoughts.
Yeah, and I mean, I absolutely agree. And just to summarize what you said, it's more about at first listening to understand and analyze what really is happening in the organization or with your client before really telling them this is what you need. Because as I did say, cultural intelligence is a very simple framework to remember, but we all know how many layers below that framework exists. So it's really important to know exact detail on what they really need to be able to provide them with the right solution. Joe, what about you? Do you have the same experience as Kelly? Do you have same stories with your client?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because most of the time people don't understand the impact of culture on the day to day. Most of the time people would criticize you. They're like, what is this gonna add? We're already busy, and busy is the most known excuse all the time, right? Comes right before we don't have the budget. So it's constantly a question that you need to be ready to go in with that mind of this is the first barrier you're gonna hit. And I think the power of CQ comes through questions. It doesn't come going in there with the answers, but it comes going in being more curious, as Kelly said. One of our participants also wrote getting our hands dirty along with the leadership who are there. So I believe the more curious you are about what's happening within the walls of that place, the more powerful you become in what you're going to bring to the table. Because again, if they just want to see a proposal, they just can read a PDF, right? They can go on the website and they can get that. But I think, and that's why, like I try as much as I can to get through to the first meeting before I send through anything. Because if you send something through before meeting with the people, one, you haven't met them. So we all know the impact of a face-to-face meeting. But most importantly is when you're actually there, the beauty of it is when you're in the room, you start to notice things while you're seated. And you can start to create examples while you're right there. It could be from people who arrive late and then someone in the meeting comments about them arriving late. It could be about someone not knowing why a certain person is in the room or why they're not in the room. So it's really interesting for me. Like for me, it's the curiosity. Like I always go in curious because if you got that meeting in, that means there is a pain. And now it's your job as a good surgeon to actually find where's the pain point.
That's so well said, Joe. And listen, as you said, GCC region, I think it's much more common here, at least from my experience, to have in-person meetings, especially first ones. And I think there's something there that can really, really be helpful. Kelly, do you have experience in having in-person first meetings or not really? I know that, for example, in Europe, it's these meetings will happen more often by a phone call or Zoom call or, rather than in person.
Yeah. A lot of my first meetings are online. Even in Istanbul, it's such a big city and it can take an hour and a half just to get from one end to the other. So for efficiency's sake, a lot of people just prefer to do them online. And then, of course, obviously, when I'm dealing with international clients, that's also how we're having our first conversations.
And what maybe just as a follow-up question on our discussion, I'm sitting here and thinking, we need to act as a doctor, right? We need to analyze to see really what is happening there. But do you notice any kind of mistakes that organizations make when they first are introduced with CQ in terms of maybe their assumptions or the way they introduce CQ? Have you ever had any situation that you might be able to share with us? I did personally, but I can share later.
Let me quickly jump into something that happened just 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was speaking with someone. I had been referred to them as they were moving to a new country for on an expatriate assignment. And when we first got on, he said, I'm kind of skeptical because I'm afraid that this program is going to be all about, well, Spanish people like, paella. And I was like, yeah, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about cultural cliches or generalizations or, things you could just Google about a culture. We're actually have a completely different approach. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
So these are the assumptions, right? And Kelly, Joe, you don't even need to mute yourself. Feel free to stay unmuted.
Thank you. Just an example, a funny example popped up. You said some of the assumptions. I think there's something really interesting that happened a couple of months back. It's about the clients wanting to put up a picture that the culture is actually not, if it makes sense. So they think they have to appear like they are. I'm going to talk cultural intelligence language now, like they are on a very low power, distant culture within their organization. They're very open for suggestions and so on and so forth. And one of them did slip in one of the meetings. And then my question to the leader was, hold on, like we just had a discussion that that's what you described the culture as, but here is a live example of what happened. So what are we advertising versus what are we actually? And then his answer to me, and he was like, no, Joe, like we have to be low power distant cultures. I was like, see, but this is the thing, like there is no you have to be. You're the company owner, you're the one that sets the culture, and hence you're the one that sets how you're going to recruit, you're the one that sets who you're going to recruit. But if you are constantly having that inner fight, you're advertising to people that you're very, oh, you can come to me with anything, you can talk to me about anything, and then the next thing people realize is, oops, I got a warning because I spoke up. Because one of the leaders actually told me that, like, like my team stopped innovating, my team stopped coming up with ideas. I don't know what's happening. And all it took was one question. I was like, what happened the last time they came up with an idea? And he said, oh, it was a stupid idea. And I was like, were those the words you used to give them feedback? He was like, yeah, like I'm very open. Like, okay, so how about you go now and you actually ask them, how did that feel? Right? So I think it's really as well, and that's why I love working with cultural intelligence assessments, because the first bit is understanding how do you define it yourself? Like where are you as a person? And then if you're a company owner, how does that impact your culture and the values that you bring out in your company? If you're part of a company, right? Where do you sit? Do you align? Do you not align? So I think self-awareness is a crucial requirement when it comes to understanding those things.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I also think what you just shared is it's all about also owning your culture and understanding there's no, especially when we talk about Joe just mentioned power distance, or that's actually the way we approach hierarchy, or different styles of communication. There is no right or wrong. These are just different ways of how we do things around here, and that's the definition of culture. So we just need to be clear on, as Joe said, who we are, and demonstrate that with the act as well. Okay, so thank you both for insightful conversation so far. But because we talked about how we get people kind of interested in CQ, what do we do to kind of, make that click? But what I want us to talk about is more practical side of it. So once you've got people in the room in front of yourself as a facilitator, how do you make sure that the first CQ session really lands with that audience? What are some maybe tricks or things that you do that was successful so far? Joe, maybe you can lead with this one.
Shall I fly? Okay, I'll fly on this one. All right. So let me then start with a very similar path. So even though we are already successful in having people in the classroom, many people who are in learning and development are going to relate to what I'm going to say right now. We do know that not everyone in the room wants to be in the room. So I always start my sessions with this. Like I always tell people, in my room, I have three types of participants, right? The first, I call them the prisoners, and they are basically prisoners. Imagine someone coming into your room handcuffed, and they don't know why they're there. They received an email maybe a day or a week before telling them, you need this training, you gotta go to this training. And they simply tell you, I really don't know why I'm here. I just got an email and hey, I'm not gonna argue with my boss, so I'm just gonna go. And the second type are what I call the tourists. And they're the ones that wanted to get out of the office on hopes that they would find something really good for the day or the 2 days they're out. And, he's a tourist or she's a tourist. And if they're tourists and if they don't find anything interesting, at least they got out of office for a couple of days. And the third are the players, right? And the players are the people who are there with a specific goal. They're there with a very clear outcome. They know why they're in the room. So then how do we set the stage for everybody, right? Because those sessions require safety. So I always tell people, listen, personally, doesn't matter why you're here. I understand the prisoners, you probably want to run. The tourists, you're hoping for something good. Players, you're hoping that you achieve what you're here for. But I'll tell everyone what I would love to have is by the end of the session, everyone leaves with at least one thing that they want to get out of the session. And that's where I start with my first question, which is, if there is one thing you want to take away from today's session, what does that look like? And then I break them out into groups, and I have every group sort of set out a couple of expectations. Because again, like as facilitators, I believe the content is amazing. The examples we have are great, but if they're not relatable to why the people actually are in the room, it's just another day. So how do we then turn those prisoners and tourists into players, giving them something to keep them in the room? Get in touch with their pain point, get in touch with their development area. Great. So if your manager didn't tell you why you want to be here, think, what is a reason that they could have wanted you to be in the room, right? So I think the moment people start to draft out what could be possible reasons and outcomes that they want from a room, I think you sort of succeed, first of all, in flipping the whole energy around. Second, giving them something to look forward to. But also third, giving yourself sort of a map on this is where I'm going to go in depth. This is where I can just touch the base. And I think it's really interesting when you see that energy shift in the room. So if you ask me from facilitator perspective, I think you need to set the ground running in the first place for everybody, and then you need to proceed with the content based on what comes out from that expectation list.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. I agree with everything you shared, but one thing that I need to say, and I think it's for everyone, how you described different types of audience that we have in front of us. I think I will never be able to be in a workshop and not notice who are the prisoners, who are travelers, and who are, how did you call the third one?
Tourists and the players.
Tourists and the players.
Yeah.
So well said. Kelly, what's your experience? What is something that when you enter the room, maybe what are the areas that you kind of dive into to make sure you connect with people who are in front of you? And yeah, it's a difficult one because, as Joe shared, not everyone is at the same level of interest at that point of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a few things I do, like Joe said at the very beginning, and which one I choose kind of depends on understanding again the context with which people are coming into the room. One of the things I also, like Joe, I start at the very beginning. Let's see, not at the very beginning. I'll start in linear order. So one of the things I do is when I open the workshop, I start with talking about culture and its relevance very broadly. I mean, even sometimes down to if you're married or you've been in a long-term partnership with someone, you've experienced a cultural difference, right? Whether it's, hey, my mom doesn't cook that dish that way, or why do you do this? Or, living together with someone who grew up in a different background, even if you're from the same town, right? Shows some cultural differences. And so I kind of start by throwing the net broadly sometimes, depending on the context of like how this is relevant, that it's not just national cultures as we talked about, but it can be socioeconomic differences, it can be functions, it can be departments or teams within departments can have their own cultures, right? And so I start kind of by casting broadly the relevance of what we're going to be talking about that day. And then I also, as Joe also does, I love the three categories. I might borrow that from you. But I also begin with that question after I talk about what we're going to be talking about that day. I start with, what was one thing you're curious about or would like to gain from today? And then I give everyone a chance to talk about that. And pretty much everyone finds something, even the skeptical ones, find something relevant that they want to take out of the day, is what I've experienced. And then if I still have some skeptical people, usually by the time we've moved into the behavioral preferences or the cultural values, so things like we were talking about high power distance, low power distance, or direct and indirect communication, uncertainty avoidance, by the time we get into those, and I start telling stories of what those look like. And suddenly I start asking participants for their experience of where they've observed these. Suddenly it becomes really relevant and applicable for them because they go, oh yeah, I've experienced that here, or I saw that in this conflict. Right. And so then that's another way that I find people really get buy-in at the beginning of a session.
So it's also very similar to the first topic that we talked about, right? It's all about finding that connection with what people experience. And in the beginning of this webinar, we did ask people what they experience in their workplace. And we all have different challenges or situations that are around us. And then to Kelly's point, when you find one connection point with what they experience, that's when you get them to listen and to engage more. We will come back to this topic. I just want to pause. We do have a question from Metra. Thank you, Metra. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you for the question. The question was, what metrics do you recommend consultants to use to demonstrate the ROI of CQ intervention? And we do get this kind of question quite often. So what I'm going to say is we typically, one thing there are many things that we can do. One of the things that we can do is use what we call pre and post assessment, meaning we assess capabilities of people, of participants before any intervention. Then we have these workshops, and we typically have a learning journey. So it's not a one-off training, but we have a learning journey where we practice with people. We give them how to create their development plans. We have check-in points, and then after a certain amount of time, we do what we call T2 assessment or a post assessment. And this is the way where we can exactly compare what is happening with their CQ scores before and after intervention. presentation, which can definitely show what happened with their capabilities and how they improved over time. But I would love to hear from both of you. Do you agree with what I shared? And of course, yes, I think we need to, it's not just about assessment itself. We need to find from the first conversation what the goal of the organization is, and then to find the ways of how to connect these CQ interventions with whether that's the engagement or effectiveness or whatever the problem the organization is trying to solve. Joe is nodding, so
Yes.
feel free to unmute and share.
Very much in agreement, yes. So in order to understand which ROI we can basically provide them on top of the pre and the post, it's to know exactly why would they want to invest into bringing us in, right? Like what's their investment in the first place based on? Like what's making them do that? But let me also maybe combine my answer with another question that was in the chat, which was from Vince, I think, which is he said, this is good, but why will a CEO give you a contract to do anything in the first place? I added in the first place. So, and I totally agree with that question. So, like I always say this, like never go in to have a conversation to get a contract. Go in with a mindset that you're going in to actually help, if and only you can help. Like one of the CEOs who had invited me to basically come and do a presentation on a couple of assessments that I can basically incorporate within the consulting project. And they had the 2 or 3 of the biggest worldwide consulting companies bidding as well for the project. And I literally got scared. I was like, why am I being called? Like I'm a little boutique, very, chill consulting company, but we do everything with heart, right? We love what we do. So, I literally told the head of the learning department, I'm like, listen, why am I being called? Like, I don't sell my company. Like, I don't go in and I say, oh, we do this, we do that. No, I genuinely go in to connect. So she said, listen, you know us inside out. You've already worked with us on a couple of projects. Those big consultants, they're coming in with a bag. We don't want people with a bag. I want you to just come and have a chat with the chief. And I had a session with my coach a day before I went to the meeting because I couldn't put a presentation together. And my coach then told me, listen, forget about the presentation, Joe. Why would anyone come to you to get coached? Like, just answer me plainly. I believe I'm a safe person to talk to. I believe I create a safe space as well when I'm having conversations with people. And most importantly, I love what I do. Forget all my certifications. And he was like, just go with this. And I literally went to the meeting with no presentation, nothing. So I got there, the CEO looks at me, he's like, so Joe, what do you have for us? I was like, nothing. And then he literally looks at me, at the head of the department of training, she literally like sunk in her seat. And he's like, what do you mean nothing? I'm like, nothing. I just got a couple of questions I need answers to. And if I can help you, then we can move to part 2. And I can show you what I can do. If I can't, then you can go with one of the other consultants. And we basically ended up going from a 30-minute meeting to a 3-hour meeting, and we ended up getting the project. So just to sort of put all of this together, when people realize that you're in the room genuinely to listen, to try and help, maybe even tell them that I might refer you to someone else if I'm not the best person to help you. That's the first way in. If there's one thing today we're lacking, and someone also had questions earlier about what's happening with AI and how people are feeling so disconnected, this is the biggest sale tool for us today. It's our connection and our presence. So I think this is basically how I would do things today.
I cannot agree more, Joe, but I see Kelly unmuted. She probably has something to say.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that approach. And people can we can tell, right? When people approach us just because they want to make money or because they really are interested in us and are happy to divert the business if they are unable to help us. So yeah, I think that's really key. Just really briefly, I would add on the topic of ROI, if you want data and numbers, the CQC has cases specific to different industries. So numbers of as outcomes of programs, the ROI that have been done in different industries. I think that can be really helpful. And then also, if you're an independent consultant, sharing your own stories as ROI as well can be really powerful when you're talking to clients. So it comes down to also understanding the client. Some are more impressed or persuaded by numbers. Some are more persuaded by stories or relationship. And so I think it's important to understand who you're talking to as well when you present ROI.
But all of this comes to some, let's say, human connection, as Joe said, and to be as transparent as possible, honest as possible. And I mean, essentially, you need to love what you do. These are all good examples. I just want to quickly go back to when we talked about this whole first training and what you as a facilitators do to kind of have this session really land and resonate with the audience. One of the questions that I specifically get when talking to customers, and then I have specific requirements from customers when it comes to that. I would love to hear both of you what you have to say on this topic, and that is how much theory do participants actually need before you as a facilitator move into application? And why I love this question is it's always a struggle. We have customers who come to us and they want to solve for these huge challenges and problems that they have. And then they tell us, we only have 1 hour or 2 hours. And now we need to fit everything together, which we all know it's impossible. But then they like to avoid theory part and move to application. But how much actually theory do our participants need, especially at this first introduction to CQ topic?
I'll let Kelly start with this one and I'll jump in later.
Eva, as you were asking that question, it came to mind something that happens to me on a relatively frequent basis, which is after a workshop, after a training, I always send an evaluation form. And quite frequently, I will get a response from someone who says, there was too much theory. I wish it was more application focused. And then I will get a response from that same session that says, there was not enough theory. I wish there was more theory. And so I'm like, wait, these people were in the same, the same training. So on the one hand, on a participant level, sometimes it's really hard to hit that balance. And some people are more analytical and prefer to process abstractly. Other people are a lot more function more tangible. So, but on more of a organizational HR level, looking at how we structure training, I find that usually what is needed or desired is application focused, right? Giving people time to practice, to try things out. As we know, CQ action is often where things get really difficult, because you go, oh, well, I don't like speaking directly. I don't like giving feedback directly because it feels so harsh and it feels so rude. And I don't think I can do that, right? But giving people time in the workshop to try that out and say, yes, it's uncomfortable. But if you push through, if you develop that muscle, it becomes more comfortable and somewhere where it's a lot easier for you to operate. So those are just kind of some thoughts off the top of my head. Joe, I'm curious about what you have to add.
Thank you, Kelly, for this. Yes, I'm just going to build on what Kelly had shared. So I think as a facilitator or a person, again, that loves and respects what you do, I think we need to have that capability to at some point say no. We need to have that capability at some point to make people understand the value that time brings forward when we have enough time to do enough theory and help people apply it. And I think there's a beautiful part about whatever we're teaching in cultural intelligence is it's so relevant. Like you just hit the nail on that one, Kelly. Like if you are someone that is very high context and we're talking about high versus low, you're gonna relate. Whether you're high, whether you're low, you're gonna relate, right? So, so I believe how we demonstrate the learning doesn't start just in the room. It starts by actually identifying the downfalls of treating this as a checklist, not having a problem to say no, because we understand the value of what we bring to the room. And I always say this to my clients, uh, because I understand everyone is in a hurry today, but this cannot be treated as a checklist. It's your money, it's your time, it's my effort, and it's something that I love. I want to see it succeed. One of my participants who attended cultural intelligence with me in 2022, right? She currently sits on she's a secretary for the board of one of the big organizations here. And literally a couple of weeks ago, she sent me a message telling me, "You have no idea. I'm still holding the cultural intelligence assessment with me everywhere I go because I'm in the room, I'm learning about the people in the room before I speak up." Right? So now I understand everyone on the board who sits, which one is the person that speaks directly, which one will tell us a story before he comes to the point. I understand each and every person how they will prefer to get their emails. So there is impact. And in order for me to be able to create that lasting impact, I need you to trust me when I tell you this is the time that I need. Because I don't believe we're discussing rocket science in the room. I believe we're discussing human beings in the room. And who wouldn't be interested to understand how can I talk to my boss better? Who wouldn't be interested? How can I speak to a CEO in an elevator better? Like, like it's very relatable to everybody. So I believe the strength lies way before even we get into that session. The moment people start to feel that you have that connection with what you're delivering, they will trust you, and then the rest is on you. You need to then deliver.
Correct. Correct. I absolutely agree. I do see somebody, Matthew, sorry, ask when you say theory, is it going through studies? This is related to the question that I asked. I just want to clarify when we say theory, we mean explaining what cultural intelligence is, going through the framework, the capabilities, the sub-dimensions of capabilities, talking about different behavioral preferences Joe used today, low and high context, what that really means and how that we see in a day-to-day. We also have a question from Barry, is creating a one-day seminar with theory and practice practical? I will say quickly, yes, but depends on what one-day seminar means and how many hours we have. But we typically, if we have enough time, we have full day, 8 hours. That's absolutely practical. And we can cover a lot and do a lot in that one day. I'm just being cautious of time. So we need to move forward to a big question. Joe already touched based on that when answering this last question that I had. And that is, I want us to talk about this big question. And that is, how do you make sure that CQ doesn't end when the training ends, but that we achieve the long-lasting impact with the audience and the organizations that we are working with. Who would love to give us their thoughts? Maybe Kelly?
Yeah, sure. And I'm going to start with something that's maybe sounds contrary. But the way I approach this question is actually whether or not the training has a long-term impact is not completely in my control, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't work unless you're in-house. But for me as an external consultant, I don't work in the company. I'm not the head of HR. I'm not the CEO. I can do my absolute best, but really it has a lot to do with understanding the client and doing everything that we can to set up the client and the participants for that long-term success. So I think there are several ways that we can do that. What's in our control and our power. And so one thing, as Eva, you just said, is that it's not just the workshop. So there are several things that can be done here. One is individual consultations, right? Having one-on-ones with people where we actually go through the feedback reports. We look at their results. What does this mean for you? What are you experiencing? Where do you want CQ to take you? How can we help it solve your problems? How can it help develop you personally and professionally? Right? That's one of the highlights of the work that I do is those one-on-one sessions, really getting to know people, hearing their stories, and then being able to talk through on a more personal level how they can integrate what they're learning. And so then along with that, as part of the feedback report, there's a action plan that's integrated. And as part of that, a question is accountability, right? Who can check in with you in 4 weeks and 8 weeks and see how you're doing, right? So that does several things. It keeps the language alive, the language of CQ. It helps keep it top of mind. It helps people actually go through with their action plans. And it keeps the conversation going with whoever their accountability partner is. So I think that's, beyond just the workshop, that's something that can be done. Another thing is I think about team integration. So beyond the individual level, then how does the team keep this alive? How does the team take this for long-term impact? And this is where I find that training really helps people develop a shared vocabulary. So whether it's the 4 factors of CQ or it's the behavioral preferences, but developing that shared language to say, oh, that's my high uncertainty avoidance preference at work here. That's why we're having a hard time seeing eye to eye, right? Just putting a language sometimes to differences helps it not become so tense between people when they're communicating, but just saying, oh, I just have a different approach. You have a different approach. I understand now where we're both coming from. And it really can diffuse the situation. So I look at how can the team integrate using this new shared language? And also for teams setting expectations together. How decision-making is done, how they communicate, right? Putting in some procedures and processes. I was recently working with a team that had a new expat come join their leadership team. And we went around doing a role play on giving feedback. And as we were talking one by one, when they came back, we did a debrief. Everyone shared from the activity. And everyone said, if you're giving feedback upwards, critical feedback upwards, you need to give it in private and you need to phrase it as a question. So one person said, in private as a question, in private as a question, in private as a question. And then the expat said something completely different, right? So you could see right there that they had really different expectations about how to communicate and how to give feedback, how to interact with hierarchy. And so that's where integrating on the team level is really significant. And so I try to help set up teams to be able to do that and begin that conversation in the training that we do together. And then finally, I realize I'm talking a long time. I'll close it by saying company-wide. Company-wide, of course. I often find that when I'm training with management team level, so C-suite, after the training, they're like, we need to do this with our leadership level too, right? Because it's really a whole organization topic if you want to develop a culturally intelligent organization. And then they need to work out together how to put in place policies and procedures that will implement these things. How can we give them tools and strategies that will help them think through those policies that will be most relevant for them and their organization. So I'll stop there and let Joe. I'd like to hear what Joe has to say.
I loved it. I was enjoying Kelly. I mean, if you want to keep going, please do. This was so much. This was so good. No, really, sincerely, it's so good. Um, So there's just one thing I would maybe add on to what Kelly had said. There is a reason why we try as much as we can when we're having conversations with companies, uh, is not to have one-offs. We most of the time work with companies on long-term programs. So how do we make things stick, Ava? I simply always say we coach post-training. So, and that will like, so cultural intelligence is either the first or the second module always. And it reappears on the coaching sessions as we go. So if you build a program for like, let's say 6 months with like 1 or 2 modules on a period of 6 months, each and every module they collect, it reappears as they go. And the beautiful part is to answer the question, how much theory, how much application? They will then come and bring those examples to your coaching session. They're like, hey, listen, you said this thing, we could do this, we could communicate this way. It did not work with my boss. What should I do? And that's where the actual learning takes place, right? So, and this is it. Like, so but the beauty is when you're doing one-offs as well, because I saw one of the gentlemen asking that in his organization, they only get 2 hours to train on cultural intelligence. And he's asking like, what do we need to put? Can we fit everything in 2 hours? I wouldn't recommend fitting everything into 2 hours. What I would recommend is find the biggest pain and then create impact with that, and then take that and start to expand your hours through results, right? Because if you basically make everyone try to swallow everything, they're going to get exhausted in 30 minutes. But you then pick up 1 or 2 points. Maybe when you're offered those 2 hours, drop in an email to people before the session, ask them, hey, listen, this is what the curriculum actually looks like. Let's pick the first 2 things that you think would benefit everybody. And then that would be your focus for the 2 hours. And then use the outcome of this to create more and more impact, and then use the bigger impact to then create bigger and bigger sessions. Because I don't think it's about the hours and how much we put into those hours. I believe it's about the pain and what are we doing about it, and are people benefiting from it or not. So that's basically, Kelly, like I think we're aligned in a lot of things that you've said on how to make it stick. But definitely, like if there is one thing I would try to always do is, if I can, I would push for a longer program and then incorporate cultural intelligence through all of my coaching sessions.
That would be ideal scenario, Joe, and I completely agree, right? Having a learning journey where you have multiple interventions is when you really can deep dive and build your skills in a proper way. And I do agree for the question that, let me see where the question is about 2 hours. Demita asked, yeah, I do agree with Joe. It's better to have 2 hours than nothing, for sure. But you need to be realistic what you can achieve in these 2 hours, rather than overcommitting, maybe choosing. We talked about these behavioral preferences, and we would typically take 2 or 3 behavioral preferences that are most relevant for your organization and focus on those. And then with those focused on, as Joe said, the biggest challenges that you have. We also got a question in the chat from Travis. Sometimes small businesses or businesses of less than 15 staff can afford important training like CQ. Are there opportunities to create cohorts of 3 to 5 businesses to join together and participate in cost sharing? So Travis, thank you for the question. Please write to us on CQ info at culturalq.com. My colleague will put the email in the chat, and we will gladly support and help you. And one of the things that I also wanted to share when Kelly was sharing that example from the session when everyone taught the same, but the expat had a different experience. We were having an in-person session where I attended as observer, and it happened in the Netherlands with a big company. C-level people were with us in the room, 6 of them. So not a big team working together every single day. And when we started asking specific questions, we had 2 people out of 6 who basically said that they don't ever express their opinions in the meetings. And there was a huge silence in the room. You could see shock on the faces of others, because they're like, how do we mean? We always talk, and they're like, you talk, we don't. And we actually, how to solve for that, it was just an enlightening moment, but the long-lasting effect turned out to be in a very small, simple solutions, such as giving, for example, to those two, giving them an opportunity for a written feedback rather than just speaking in front of everyone. And then also what they've done, we checked in with them a couple of months later. I've been before every meeting, they would have 3 to 5 minutes opening just to align on what they really want that meeting to look like, and just to plan it ahead, which helped these two people to really express what they are thinking. We still have a lot of questions. We didn't cover. We got so many questions before this webinar. We will make sure to answer these questions post-webinar in writing, because we just simply don't have time. I just want to say to everyone who is here today, we prepared for you a 15% discount on all CQ certification, workshop delivery and licensing programs and our workshops until end of September. So if you're in the spot where you're thinking to get yourself certified and join our CQ certified community, please use Impact for 15% discounts on all workshops. And I would love to address last question. We only have 2 minutes left. Thank you all for being with us, just in case you drop a few minutes early. But for those who are staying until the end, in short, where do you see a role of leaders? What do you see the role leaders play when it comes to the long-lasting impact of CQ trainings in the organization?
All right, I'll go. Thank you, Kelly. So for me, look, again, like I think leaders are the ones that set pace. You can do all the trainings in the world. And that's why I always tell people, like, you'll read all of those, big titles, become the most efficient, greatest leader, blah, blah. No, it wouldn't happen in 2 days, wouldn't happen in 2 hours, wouldn't happen in 4 months if you're not given the space to implement the learning. So I think if the leaders are unaware of what they want and they're treating this as a checklist, it's gone. So I believe they're a very integral part, and that's why if your value system doesn't align with the value system of the organization, we all know what happens, right?
I
So
agree.
in short, that's my shortest answer on this, basically.
Kelly, anything to add in this last minute of the webinar?
Yeah, I think I would just agree and say leadership, buy-in, and support is absolutely critical, especially if you want to see organizational-wide change. Yeah.
I do agree, and we always advise, to go what we would say from top to bottom, when we really want to have organization embed CQ across all the departments and really embed it in their culture. We are at time. I would love to thank Kelly and Joe for this amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Very grateful to have you both here. Thank you everyone for being with us this whole session. It was a pleasure being here, and don't forget to use Impact for 50% off on all the workshops and our certification programs. For any questions, please don't hesitate to write to our email address info@culturalq.com. Please don't forget to connect with all three of us on LinkedIn. We are more than welcome. We're more than happy to connect with you all and have a chit chat or answer any questions you might have. Thank you, everyone.